Now we're on the move. It's 9 minutes past 10 o'clock on BBC Radio Oxford. You can call the show, of course, anytime you want this morning. Stroke into the afternoon, because I'm here until 1. It's 03459 311 111. You can text me on 81333, starting your message with the word Oxford. I'm malcolm.boyden at bbc.co.uk. Great story to start with this morning. We're starting with the tale of a bloke with a limp. His words, not mine, and why his daughter's about to throw herself out of a plane. Mark Stone is the man with a limp. He's from East Oxford. He was diagnosed with motor neurone disease in January 2012. He's here in the studio to tell us a little bit more about it. That's where the story begins for us this morning. Mark, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming in. I want you to start by taking us to January 2012, or a little bit before, actually.
Yes.
What was life like for you?
Well, I was working as a freelancer, commuting to London and coming to the end of a project. And what happened, actually, was that I was going to London and running for a bus. This was in spring 2011. And as I was running for the bus, I noticed that my foot was behaving in the most peculiar way. And it was just sort of flapping. I was thinking like I was running like a seal or something like that. My right foot was sort of behaving very strangely. So I wondered if it was a problem to do with my shoes or something like that. Or was I carrying too many bags? Or did I simply have a big coat on and too much on me, and just sort of watched it. And over the months, I noticed that this seemed to be happening quite regularly. As I was walking along the pavement, I noticed that my foot was making a flapping noise. One of my feet was making a flapping noise on the pavement. And eventually I thought, this is nothing to do with shoes, this is nothing to do with what bag I'm carrying or anything like that. Something's wrong, really. And so I went to the GP in the late summer of 2011 and told them about it. But really, the story went before January 2012 was that, I was a middle-aged freelancer having an interesting, varied life, commuting to London, doing various projects, work in health and social care projects of various sorts, and looking forward to, sort of a long working life and, into my 80s or something like that, as most of my parents have.
Did you have any idea? Did your GP at first have any idea what this flapping foot might be?
No, not initially. So initially what happened was I went to the GP at the end of the summer, and they said, well, don't know about this. Doesn't look awfully serious to me. You could go and see a podiatrist, but they're awfully busy, and we don't want to waste their time. So I'm going to have to refer it to the GP's panel and find out. And anyway, the GP panel said, yes, you can go to the podiatrist. So I got a letter, and 10 weeks later, it's quite a long waiting list to see them, I saw a podiatrist. And the podiatrist basically saw me for about a minute or two before they realised that there was something very, very different wrong. There was nothing they couldn't deal with, so they asked me to walk across the room, and I walked across the room and I tripped, and he asked me to lift my leg, and I lift my leg and I went in spasm, and he asked me to flex my foot, point my toes towards my face, as it were, and if I looked at how I could flex my left foot compared to my right foot, I had far more mobility in my left foot than in my right.
Yes.
So at that stage, the podiatrist said, look, I'm really sorry, but I think you've come to the wrong person. You need to go back to your GP. I think you probably need to see a neurologist, but I'm not sure. So I said, what have I got? And he said, well, absolutely no idea what you've got, but the symptom that you have is known as drop foot, in terms of having losing the muscle tone in the foot so that you can't flex it properly. But, that can be caused by any number of conditions, and somebody who knows what they're doing a specialist needs to look at you and examine you.
That's exactly what happened. A specialist looked at you and examined you.
Yes. So I had a series of tests. I went back to the GP. I went back to a different GP at that stage, and somebody who I felt very confident in, and told her what had happened, and she agreed immediately to refer me to neurology at the JR.
Yeah.
And then basically I had a series of appointments at the John Radcliffe with neurologists, and they were doing various tests, and I was sort of going back more and more often, but nothing came out of it, and I just had this sequence of appointments until January the 31st, 2012, last year.
New Year's Eve.
That December the 31st would be a month after New Year's Eve.
My calendar's never been good. New Year's Eve plus 1 month.
Plus one.
Yeah. So what happened then, and how did it make you feel when motor neurone disease was mentioned?
It was an unbelievable shock. I obviously, once I'd had the name of the symptom from the podiatrist, which was October 2011 or something like that, I'd looked up what drop foot could be a symptom of.
Yes.
And there was a list of about 40 conditions, including everything under the sun: diabetes, trapped nerves, Parkinson's, any number of things. And down the bottom of the list was motor neurone disease. And I'd looked up each one of them and systematically, just eyeballed them, but, just thought, okay, what's this? When I read about motor neurone disease, I stopped, because I just thought, I don't want to read about this. When I read what the condition is and what it does to you, and the fact that it's totally incurable, it was the one I didn't want, I suppose. So when the consultant said, I think he said to me, what do you think it might be? And I'd said various things, and I said motor neurone disease, and he said, what do you know about motor neurone disease? And that was the point where I thought, right, he's telling me it's motor neurone disease. And I said, well, it's incurable and it's terminal. And people don't live very long after they're diagnosed with it. And he said, well, with most people that's true. With some people it can be very variable. But yes, it is incurable. We don't have a cure for it. And it's, I think he called it a life-limiting illness, was the phrase that was used. But, effectively, yes, it is it's a terminal disease.
Can you remember your drive back from that appointment? Can you remember telling your partner and your girls?
Well, my partner was with me at the time, so they had said, particularly for the last few appointments, please come with a family member.
Yes.
I hadn't realised the particular significance of that, but obviously now in retrospect that makes complete sense. So we were in the room together, and I remember after I'd read a little bit about motor neurone disease. My wife hadn't at all. And, when I mentioned that it was terminal, she looked completely ashen. And then I said to the consultant, so how long do people generally live after diagnosis? And he said, well, on average 2 to 3 years. But it can be very, very different. And I remember she just gasped audibly at that point. That was really when it became very, very, very real, and really hit us. And then, the journey back and the next few days were very, very, very strange. There's sort of it was a bombshell. Obviously, it's the sort of thing that you imagine happening to other people. It sounds extraordinary, but it felt, it was an unreal experience in as much as it's just something that you don't expect to happen to you. And obviously, most people won't experience that sort of shock in that sort of way.
How old are you, Mark?
I'm 52.
Okay. How's life been since? How have you learnt to not necessarily cope, but live with motor neurone disease? How's it affecting you?
Well, I mean, I think it affects me on various different levels. One is the level of knowing that you have a terminal condition and that your whole life has been altered, and where you might think of 20, 30 years, you might now be thinking of 2 or 3 years or 5 years or something like that. So there's psychological impact. There's the physical impact, which is that what's happened with me is that my right leg has just continued to get weaker and weaker. So it's gone from the ankle to the leg, and the leg now is very, very weak. I can get around on crutches. I used to get around on a stick. I'll probably move over to a wheelchair or a rollator at some stage. Relatively soon, I use a wheelchair sometimes. So that it's a question of adapting to all those changes. It's a question of adapting to the reality that life is very, very different from how it was. It's a question of having to do a huge amount of planning and a huge amount of putting change into place. Because as I lose my mobility, and in the future I'll probably lose my dexterity, it'll affect my hands, I might lose my communication skills. A lot of people with motor neurone disease can't speak. So you have to think through what might happen then and what you have to put in place for that. So there's a lot of that, and then there are positive sides. I mean, the positive side has been the incredible support I've had from friends and family. People have really, really, really come together. People care. It's very, very, very obvious that people care, and they've shown it in any number of small and big ways. And also, in a sense, I've joined a new community, which is the community of people who are living with MND, and the people who care for that community, because there are a lot of people who, particularly through the charity, they're often relatives of people who've passed away through MND or living with it, and they've been an incredible source of help, inspiration, sustenance. I mean, it's a large part of my life in a way. So some doors close and some doors open. And I suppose psychologically you have to live with the fact that, at the moment I'm okay. At the moment I'm somebody who's got a limp. That's why I call my blog Bloke with a Limp. And you have to live with what you have at the moment. So it's difficult. There's part of it which is planning for the future, knowing that the future is going to be very different and more challenging, but also trying to live in the present and enjoy the present, because the present is as it is, and there are many things I can do and enjoy.
Why is Emma, your daughter, throwing herself out of a plane on Thursday? Emma's doing a skydive to raise funds for the MND Association. She's doing her GCSEs at the moment. In fact, she's just as we speak, I think she's doing one of her geography GCSEs at Cheney School. Good luck.
But she's finishing them next Wednesday, and she's going for a skydive on Thursday. So we're driving her up to Brackley and see her onto the plane. And yes, she's trying to raise funds for the MND Association, which is just amazing.
Great, good for her. How do you feel about that?
Mixed feelings, I suppose, is the... I'm incredibly proud, incredibly touched, incredibly pleased, and also extraordinary trepidation because she's just turning 16. She'll be 3 days after her 16th birthday when she's legally allowed to do this.
She's just helping her dad. She's just supporting you.
Yeah. I mean, she's just fantastic. But it's, a terrifying thought. Terrifying thought. The idea of launching yourself out of a plane with strapped to somebody with a parachute as your lifeline. But I'm sure it'll be amazing. I'm sure it'll be inspiring, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing for her to be doing.
Hear, hear. It is indeed. Mark, I think you're an inspiration. Can I ask you this question? When you look at the future, and you've talked about the future with me honestly, and I thank you for that this morning, are you scared?
Yes and no. I think it depends how I feel, and it depends what state I'm in. It depends what element of the future we're thinking of. I mean, I think the idea of being very, very impacted by the disease, the point at which you lose mobility, you lose dexterity, you lose communication skills, very, very, very challenging. And the idea of living with that is very challenging. I know some people who are living like that. Stephen Hawking is the person who's best known, who are very impacted by motor neuron disease. He's absolutely not typical in terms of living that long and surviving that long after the condition. So that is immensely challenging. Last night we showed a film at the UPP off Cowley Road, which was the story of Jason Becker, a rock guitarist, and who's been impacted by MND. And there were times in that where it was very, very troubling, seeing him incredibly ill, gasping for air. That's scary, and the idea of that is very, very scary. But I think what I try to do is not look too far, as it were, down the road. I look at what's the next change that's going to happen, and how am I going to cope with that, and what am I going to put in place for that, and live for the present and live for that. And then, I think if you look too far into the future and you look too far down that road, it can be very troubling. But I try not to, and to enjoy life as it is at the moment, and as I anticipate it will be next week or the week after or something. So difficult question to answer, challenging question,
but well answered, sir. And I like the idea of your blog. He calls it, is it actually called A Bloke with a Limp?
Yes.
Yeah. Can we follow you then on that?
Yes, of course,
Yeah.
yes. I think it's, if I remember rightly, www.blokewithalimp.org is the URL. Yes, and I think there's a link to my daughter's Just Giving page there, so if anybody would like to...
Yes, please.
Feel that they would like to support her and the MND Association, which provides care and provides funding for research to find cures and treatment for MND, then it'd be wonderful if they can help, if they would like to.
It would be. Thank you so much for coming in and telling us your story this morning, Mark. Will you come back?
I would love to.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
I'd love that as well.
Thank you.
I'd love to know how you're getting on, and I'm sure the listeners would as well. I'm sure I speak for them all. It's Mark Stone. He's from East Oxfordshire. He's the bloke with the limp. And good luck to Emma as well with her exams, and good luck to her with her skydive too. And it's nice to see you now. I know the listeners can't, but it's nice to see you smiling away as well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in. Incredible story. 28 minutes past 10.
BBC Radio Oxford.